Someone collapses on a crowded street. 40 people walk past. Nobody stops. You've probably seen a video like this online and felt a flash of disgust. You've probably told yourself you would never do that. But the real answer is far stranger than cruelty. The truth has almost nothing to do with how much you care. It has to do with how many people are standing next to you. In 1964, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was murdered outside her apartment building in Queens, New York. Newspapers reported that dozens of neighbors heard her screams and did nothing. The story horrified the country. It became a symbol of urban indifference, proof that people had simply stopped caring about each other. Two psychologists didn't believe that explanation. Their names were John Darley and Bibb Latané. They suspected something colder and more mechanical was happening inside the human mind. So they built an experiment to test it. Participants sat alone in a room, supposedly having a conversation over an intercom with other students. In reality, the other voices were recordings. Partway through, one voice began to choke and call for help, sounding like it was having a seizure. Some participants believed they were the only one who could hear it. Others believed several other people were listening too. The results were stunning. When a person believed they were the only witness, they almost always rushed to help. Nearly all of them. But when they believed others were listening as well, helping dropped sharply. Many sat frozen, doing nothing, even as the voice on the intercom seemed to be dying. Darley and Latané called this the bystander effect. The more witnesses present, the less likely any single person is to act. They didn't stop with one version of the experiment. They ran it again and again, changing the conditions slightly each time, trying to find the edges of the effect. They tested groups of 2, groups of 3, groups of 6. Each time the pattern held. As the number of perceived witnesses climbed, the percentage of people who intervened dropped, and the time it took anyone to act stretched longer and longer. In some trials, by the time someone finally moved, the emergency had already gone on for minutes. What makes this finding so unsettling is what it implies about good people. The participants weren't cruel. Follow-up interviews showed they were anxious, conflicted, sweating, glancing at the door. They wanted to help. Something in their wiring simply wouldn't let the signal through. Why would more people watching make help less likely? You'd expect the opposite. More eyes should mean more hands. Your brain doesn't work that way. It runs on ancient shortcuts, built for small groups on open savannas, not crowded sidewalks or comment sections. And one of those shortcuts is called diffusion of responsibility. Here's what that means in plain terms. When you're the only person who sees something wrong, the full weight of that moment lands on you. There's no one to share it with. Your brain treats it as urgent and personal. But the instant other people enter the picture, your mind quietly does the math. It assumes someone else will probably step in. It assumes someone more qualified is already handling it. The responsibility doesn't vanish. It just gets divided into smaller and smaller pieces until each person is left holding almost nothing. Imagine responsibility as a weight, a physical object you can feel pressing on your chest. Alone, you carry the full weight. With one other witness, you carry half. With 10 witnesses, you carry a tenth. And a tenth of an emergency rarely feels like an emergency at all. With 100 witnesses, the weight becomes so thin it's almost imperceptible. This isn't a conscious decision. Nobody stands in a crowd and calculates fractions. The math happens beneath awareness, far faster than conscious reasoning could ever move. There's a second force at work too, just as old. It's called pluralistic ignorance. Picture yourself in that crowd. You see someone on the ground. Your first instinct is alarm, but then you glance around. Everyone else looks calm. Nobody is rushing forward. So you recalibrate. Maybe it's not actually an emergency. Maybe you're overreacting. You look to the group for the correct emotional response, and the group is doing exactly what you're doing. Looking back, waiting for someone else's face to tell them how to feel. Nobody is acting because everybody is watching everybody else, and nobody wants to be wrong or to look foolish for panicking over nothing. This is where it gets strange. Each individual in that frozen crowd may privately suspect something is wrong, but the crowd, as a whole, behaves as if nothing is. Psychologists call this collective blindness a false consensus, a moment where every person privately disagrees with the apparent mood of the group, yet nobody says so, because everyone assumes they're the only one who feels that way. Your calm face convinces the stranger next to you that everything is fine. Their calm face convinces you of the same thing. Around and around it goes, until an entire crowd of secretly worried people manages to look completely unworried. Anthropologists believe this instinct has deep evolutionary roots. For most of human history, you lived in small bands of 15 to 50 people. Everyone knew everyone. If something dangerous happened, there was no anonymity to hide behind. Your inaction would be seen, remembered, and judged by people you'd have to face again tomorrow. In that world, social visibility kept people accountable. Your reputation was your survival. But that system was never built for cities of millions, for crowds of strangers who will never see you again, for the strange psychological privacy that comes from being one face in a sea of faces. The bystander effect isn't a flaw in your character, it's an old survival algorithm, running on hardware it was never designed for. Researcher Stanley Milgram, known mostly for his obedience experiments, also studied what he called the experience of overload in dense urban environments. His theory was simple. When you're surrounded by constant stimulation, by strangers and noise and movement, your brain starts filtering things out just to function. You stop registering individuals as individuals. They become background, scenery, and it's much harder to feel responsible for scenery. Decades later, researchers revisited the Kitty Genovese case and found the original reporting had exaggerated the numbers. Far fewer people had actually witnessed the attack clearly, and at least one person did call the police. The myth had outgrown the facts, but the psychological pattern it pointed to was real, and it has been replicated again and again in laboratories ever since. So does this mean you're powerless against your own wiring? Not entirely. Darley and Latane found something important buried in their data. The bystander effect can be interrupted. When one person breaks the spell, even slightly, it changes everything. If just one bystander shows visible concern or points at the situation and says something like, "You, in the blue jacket, call an ambulance," the diffusion collapses instantly. Responsibility becomes specific again. It has a name, a face, a direction. This is why emergency responders are trained to single out individuals in a crowd rather than shouting general pleas for help. A general cry gets diffused across dozens of people until it belongs to no one. A direct, specific instruction lands on exactly one person, and that person almost always responds. Think about how often this plays out in your own life, far from any emergency. A group project where everyone assumes someone else will finish the report. A long email thread where everyone assumes someone else will reply first. A problem at work that everyone sees and nobody mentions, because surely someone with more authority is already aware. The bystander effect doesn't only live in dramatic street scenes, it lives in your inbox, in your meetings, in your group chats. It lives in your neighborhood too. A car alarm blares for 20 minutes on a busy street and nobody calls the owner because somebody else surely already has. None of these moments make headlines, but they are built from the exact same psychological material as the intercom experiments in 1968. Online, the effect multiplies. A video of someone in distress gets shared to thousands of people simultaneously. Each viewer experiences the same psychological math the participants in that experiment experienced, except now the crowd isn't 15 people in a hallway. It's 15,000 people scattered across a screen, each one assuming the others are already calling for help, already doing something. The diffusion of responsibility scales with the size of the internet itself. Knowing this changes what responsibility actually requires of you. It isn't enough to feel concerned privately while assuming the crowd will act on your behalf. The crowd is thinking the exact same thing about you. The next time you witness something that unsettles you in public or online, the most useful question isn't simply, should someone do something? It's a sharper question. Wait, should I be the one? That single shift, from passive concern to direct ownership, is the exact mechanism that breaks the spell Darley and Latane discovered. It's the difference between 40 people staring at the same emergency and one person finally moving toward it. Someone collapses on a crowded street. 40 people walk past. Nobody stops. But somewhere in that crowd, one person could ask a different question than everyone else is asking. Not whether help is needed, whether they are the help.